introductory things. I did want to let you know, this is Bethany Yeager from KEB. I'm here with Christy Jones of KEB and Mike Baker of Commerce. Today's webinar follows up from the webinar that we had in December 16th that introduced the Governor's Guidelines Revision 2. And what this webinar is doing is explaining in more detail the MOU template, the standard budget spreadsheet, and then we'll talk about some new federal guidance that came out in January. But the content for the MOU template and the budget spreadsheet has not changed since we last spoke with you in December. But what we're doing today is explaining the actual fillable documents, and we'll scroll through them to show you and highlight some of the information that hopefully will be helpful for you as you fill them out in the next few months. So what we're, today's on the screen that you see now shows 6 sections that we want to talk about today. First, we want to make sure that you all have the context and highlight a few things from the Governor's Guidelines Revision 2 just as a reminder. Then we'll talk about the MOU template, and we'll scroll through that document to show you some examples. And then we will talk about the FTE calculation spreadsheet, which is used to show the commitments that each required partner will make in order to provide the services in each local area. Then we'll get into the standard budget spreadsheet that shows infrastructure costs and shared costs and system costs. Then we'll close with the federal guidance, and I'll give you an update about where that stands. And then lastly, we'll just give you a reminder about the timelines and where hopefully you'll be able to be leading up to some deadlines coming up this spring. So first, just a few reminders about the Governor's Guidelines Revision 2. These dates that you see on the screen are in the Governor's Guidelines, so we just wanted to remind you of them, and they're the same that we presented in the December 16th webinar. So by April 15th, that's when your MOUs and your annual budgets for service delivery are due. A report of outcomes is due that day on April 15th, as well as a draft budget. So then if your local area and your required partners in that area have not reached an agreement, then starts a 30-day remediation period that happens in the month of May. And after that, any areas that the remediation didn't work for them, they would be considered at impasse, and that impasse is reported to federal agencies by July 1st of this year. And then there are processes spelled out in the Governor's Guidelines for how that all happens, so we encourage you to review the Governor's Guidelines, but this is just a reminder because it is relevant to what we're talking about today. Another refresher before we get into the MOU template, there are some significant changes that were reflected in the final rules that are also incorporated into the Governor's Guidelines Revision 2. And those changes that I'm going to highlight on this screen affect the MOU. So that's why I want to make sure that we just review them real quick. There are 3 methods that required partners can use to deliver career services in a one-stop center. One is the on-site staff, whether it's their program staff or a contractor. Someone is available and knowledgeable in that program available on-site to provide the services. The second option is cross-trained staff. So this could be someone from one required partner who's going to be cross-trained in providing the services of another required partner. So this is a new emphasis in the Governor's Guidelines and the MOU template, as you'll see when we start going through it. The third option is through what WIOA calls the direct linkage technology, and there are specific rules about what that means and what satisfies the direct linkage requirements. For those of you who are taking notes, the Governor's Guidelines Revision 2, Appendix Item 4, it's on page 62 of the document, that explains what direct linkage technology requirements in Illinois are, so you're welcome to go review that if you need more information about it. For our purposes today, it's really just explaining that this is a third option that required partners can use, that if they don't have someone available on site, They can have someone available in another location, available by technology that's on demand, and providing the service as if that service provider were actually in the room. The second item on the screen shows that this is new content in the revision 2. The local Workforce Innovation Board chair can designate the one-stop operator as a resource for providing staff to be cross-trained in providing another required program. So all of that affects how you fill out the MOU, and we'll show you some examples shortly. So these are the changes in the MOU template that were incorporated into revision 2. These are the same that you saw on December 16th. Again, this is just a little reminder that there is a new emphasis on a commitment to integration, as well as a requirement to describe not just what you're going to do as required partners, but how you're going to do it. And those are 2 learnings that we had from the first round of reviews that that took place last summer for the first year of MOUs under WIOA. So we're getting a little bit smarter, and we want to provide this feedback to you as ways that you can make sure your MOU is really good. Another change that we'll show you is the parties to the MOU section was, hopefully we've made that cleaner and easier to fill out. We also reformatted signatures, and we want to show you the local service matrices because some things have changed based on the final rules in there. And then we'll get into the FTE calculation spreadsheet and the standard budget format, which is also a spreadsheet. And the last item, number 8, you can highlight text and format some content using dot points, which was probably an annoyance for you last time you all went through this. That probably was not available this time. We hope that being able to format your text will just make it a little bit easier to highlight what you want to highlight of the content. So now I want to scroll through the actual MOU template and just highlight a few things for you. That's just a screenshot. I'm going to pull it up real quick. The first thing we want to highlight about the MOU template are the 2 signatures at the top. First is the individual designated by the local board chair to lead the MOU negotiations, and second is the individual designated by the local board chair to lead annual budget negotiations. Both of these are new signatures for the MOU template, but they will help with the remediation process if it comes to that, and also just keep us informed and we know how to contact the individuals who are doing the negotiations so that we can get an update in any time. The second item is the expansion of the parties to the MOU. We included more chief elected officials for those areas that have more than a few. And we also added on the second page, there's a little bit of a delay on this computer, I apologize. On the second page, check marks for the situational partners for whether they are in the new in offering services in your local area, yes or no. If yes, then you can mark them as participating in the negotiations, and if no, you just move on. There's also a section, as you see in the center there, of where you can add the additional partners if you choose to in your local area. The next item, I just want to focus on the italicized dot points underneath each section. The point here is that every dot point is required content. That means you have to address all of them in order to be compliant with the MOU requirement. If you miss some, you miss potentially excluding content that's required in the final rules. So these dot points align with the final rules, and in some places we inserted the citation to the final rules so you can go look them up if you have questions about it. But the point is fill out every piece of required content by answering all the information required in the dot points. The next section I want to highlight in the MOU template is the description of the comprehensive one-stop services. This is item 6 in the MOU template. You will complete a local service matrices, and that's included in the MOU template, but also you'll provide a narrative in the space provided on page 4. So these italicized items here in the space provided below are what you write for every required partner listed in the MOU template, so that it describes the manner in which the services will be coordinated and delivered through the one-stop system. So they have every partner, not just some, every partner that participates in the MOU has to explain how their services will be provided and as reflected in the service matrices. So it's just explaining the service matrices in a little more, in a narrative rather than just showing it in a bunch of check boxes. The next section is item 12 in the MOU template that I want to highlight. Item 12 is on page 7, and it explains further the cost and cost sharing of services. And again, here you're going to fill out, which is known as Appendix Item 8 in the Governor's Guidelines. This is the standard budget template and the FTE commitments calculation spreadsheet. And then in the space provided in below, so you fill out those two documents, and then you also, in the space below, explain it and satisfy all of the dot points underneath the section 12. And the thing I want to also highlight here is that there are new descriptors for making FTE commitments that relate to cross-training. And Mike Baker is going to walk you through some examples in an actual spreadsheet in just a little bit. But I just wanted to point out in the MOU template that there's some more explanation about how to do that. So when you're filling out the FTE calculation spreadsheet, you can look at the MOU template for just a little more guidance and see how it all fits in. And then hopefully the spreadsheet corresponds with the narrative that you put in the actual MOU template. And the last item I want to highlight in the items 12 about cost and cost sharing of services is the last dot point. This is specifically required in the final rules, and everyone just has to acknowledge that the agreements made are contingent on availability of federal funding. That will make the lawyers happy if we put all that in there. And the last item before we get into the next section is the signature section. It's item 20 in the MOU template, but it spans many pages. And that's because we split out all the signatures per partner, so they each have their own page. And we hope this will help make the submission process cleaner so that you're not submitting the same signature over and over and over again as they trickle in. If each partner has their own page, then you can just submit it once. If you have more than local board chairs than there are pages, you can just submit that blank page for each one. We just hope that it makes it easier as you're collecting and compiling the final MOU template signature or MOU signatures, that this process just makes it a little bit cleaner. And then I did want to show you just one more example of a signature page, because there is an addition that we added that, again, we hope that this will add some clarity around who makes the financial commitments and the programmatic commitments versus who actually negotiates. Governor's guidelines are intended and actually require the person who negotiates the MOU to have the authority to make programmatic and financial commitments, but we also know with some state partners that the authority comes from someone who is not necessarily going to negotiate all 22 MOUs in the state. So we add a line for those who are actually doing the negotiations and a signature line for those who have the authority to make the financial and programmatic commitments if it's different than the person who negotiated the MOU. So we added that as a possibility for you if that applies to your required program. The next item I want to highlight is the career service matrices on page 39. I could have gone there in a more efficient manner, sorry, than scrolling, but we'll get there. Okay. So one thing you'll notice about the local service matrices that's different from last year's is that the career services are split into the 3 types described in the final rules or emphasized in the final rules. The first is basic career services. So all the required programs fill out those, which basic career services apply to their programs under WIOA and which they are going to provide in the local area. And then the next item of career services are for individualized and follow-up career services. So each required partner indicates which of those services they will provide in the one-stop centers and that are authorized under WIOA for their programs. The next section of this is still considered part of the service matrices. So other than career services, what activities and programs are going to be available from each required partner? So there's career services and then there are other. This table that you see on the screen shows the other programs and activities that each required partner will provide. And then the last item of the local service matrices shows the service delivery method. So how will the partners actually provide the services? And this includes whether they're going to provide provide services using on-site staff or contractors, cross-trained staff, or direct linkage technology. So this is where you would get a little bit more specific about how. And then that would correspond with the actual narrative in the MOU template that you fill out. So whatever is marked here is explained further for each required partner in the actual MOU narrative.
And that's a form the field gave us a little feedback on that we may be making some changes to. We shared a draft with IWP, and we'll be probably revamping this form based on that feedback.
Until then, use the version that is here. Okay, so that is the MOU template. I know that was brief. I want to stop here real quick before we move on to see if there are any questions before we move on to the FTE calculation spreadsheet. So anything that we've said so far or the MOU template in particular? So there's one question that says, oh, I need to scroll up here in order to see it, I'm sorry. What does impartial individual mean for budget negotiations? It just means the governor's guidelines say private sector board member or other impartial individual so that there's no potential conflicts while negotiations occur.
Ideally, someone that doesn't work for one of the partners that is part of the negotiation process.
Just trying to make sure there's integrity in the negotiations and that everyone is treated fairly and on even ground. So I would like to respond to Steve Martin's question. We haven't heard from required partners as to whether they are attending the meetings. What if a partner does not comply? What we're doing, as we did last year, is compiling the list of all the MOU negotiators, and we could be in contact with them to get clarifications on, have you reached out to them, who are you reaching out to? If they're not the right person, then that's where we can provide some assistance through the state technical assistance teams to make sure that the right person is invited and actually does attend the MOU negotiations. So the state technical assistance teams, the STATs for short, can be your liaison to the state level partners represented on the WIOA interagency work group, and they can help get the right person if you're having that trouble. So there's 2 ways to go about it. One, we encourage you to use and communicate with your staff teams in your regions, and they can be the liaison to the interagency work group if needed. And number 2 is check the MOU negotiator list and work with your MOU negotiator to see what has been expressed to the partners to make sure that they know about and are invited to the MOU negotiations. Mike, is there anything else you'd add?
Yeah, I would encourage you, rattle the cage sooner rather than later. If you have a required partner that you know is active in your area, but you're unable to make contact with them, the sooner that issue is brought to the attention of the technical assistance teams and the interagency work group, the more likely it is we can resolve it in a reasonable fashion.
Yeah, and if you have questions about it, you're always welcome to contact us. We will get you in connection with the right person. So we'll just kind of work through as many channels as we can and get the most efficient response to you. That's the entire purpose of the STAT teams, and that's what we encourage you to do.
Yeah, plus there have been instances where the same partner is a difficult partner. In the case of a national program, several areas had problems connecting with that particular partner. So, we will do all that we can to help facilitate that connection as well. But you got to let us know about it before we can take action. Yeah, to Mary Beth's question about an example of other program activity, basically it's any value-added service that you would provide to participants or customers that come into the center that is not specifically reflected on the matrix as it exists now. So really, there's no limit as to what can go there as long as it's a value-added service provided to customers.
And there's another question that the last page of the MOU template, let's see, I'm sorry.
Well, while Bethany's figuring that one out, I'll add to my last response too. If you're providing services to employers and businesses that walk into the center and request help, that would be potentially an item that could go there as well.
Regarding the service delivery method, that's the last page of the service matrices, which is the last page of the MOU template. What you enter in there, for example, if you are going to use direct linkage technology, then the required partner would enter in that column, okay, we're going to use a phone system to a dedicated person that is available, and that an answering service is not our primary method of providing the service, but it is a reliable source that will get back to the person within 24 business hours as required in the direct linkage requirements. Or we'll use video such as Skype, and if we are not available at the exact time that the person wants the service, then we will make sure that they can make an appointment within the 24 business hours that's required so we can deliver the service via Skype. I mean, those are the kind of specifics that you put in the service delivery method. Or if there's cross-training, you're going to mention cross-training elsewhere in the MOU, but it needs to be shown that, Title 1B partner is going to be cross-trained in providing second chance or whatever it is. That's where you would explain it in the service matrices. It just needs to make sure that as much detail is provided as possible, again, to be as specific as possible so that partners don't just say, yeah, we're going to use technology, but we have no idea what that means and whether it actually complies with the direct linkage requirements. And again, I encourage you to visit Appendix Item 4 in the Governor's Guidelines on page 62 so that you can see what those direct linkage requirements are. They are more specific in Illinois than they are in the final rules.
And to Pat's question about the template, the changes we're talking about are very simple to make. We can have those completed today. We're not? You have a different, I'm talking about that one form. You have another item? I'm sorry.
Pat, the answer is to make sure that you keep using this version until you hear otherwise, because there are many considerations that are going on related to changes. So we're not going to issue a new version every 5 days. You know, we want to make sure that we have a series of changes all together so that we are as clear as possible when changes need to be made. I don't have a date on that, but we know that it needs to come out as soon as possible.
Sorry for the confusion there, gang. I thought Pat was asking about the form I mentioned earlier that I had shared with Julie Courtney. But yeah, the bigger issue is just as Bethany described, so we understand that that's an issue.
Yeah, as soon as possible. Trust me, we all are working on it and trying to get the answers we need to get in order to issue updated governor's guidelines, and we'll get that. I'll get to that in the last section of this webinar. Okay, I think what we'll do is move on to the next section for the FTE calculations. What I'm going to do is just talk about 3 key concepts related to the FTE calculations, and then Mike will take you through the actual spreadsheet to show you some examples of how it could work. So the first is the concept that I want to highlight for the FTE calculation spreadsheet is that we are going to ask you to account for cross-trained staff specifically in the spreadsheet. So one example is that, say, again, this is totally arbitrary, but one example is that Title 1B is what's called the contributing partner. So Title 1B will provide one FTE to be cross-trained in providing another program services. The example here is Second Chance. So then what that means is that the Title 1B, by providing that one cross-trained staff to provide another services, in effect it reduces its infrastructure cost allocation by 1 FTE. That's because the governor's guidelines prioritize or emphasize the preferred method of using FTEs as the basis for allocating costs across all the required partners. And so in this example, if Title 1B contributes one cross-trained staff to another partner, that essentially reduces its infrastructure cost allocation by 1 FTE. So Second Chance on the other side is the receiving partner of that cross-trained staff, and they are going to cover the costs of that cross-trained staff, even though it's a Title 1B position. So they, regardless of whether it's their staff or someone else's staff providing their services, they have to cover that cost of the FTE. So I think hopefully that will solidify when Mike shows you, that'll solidify your understanding when Mike shows you the spreadsheet, how to fill that out. The second concept for the FTE calculation spreadsheet is that it basically relates to who you count in your FTE count when you're filling out the spreadsheet. So the working definition is count only the FTEs who are providing services under WIOA, not FTEs who are under the same roof but provide other services that are not under WIOA. So the example that came to our attention is for Illinois Department of Employment Security, IDES. If they are, say, a leaseholder of a building of the one-stop center, and they have, let's just say, 5 FTEs providing services under WIOA, but they have 25 other employees who are in the same building but providing other services, not WIOA, then IDES only counts the 5 who are providing WIOA services in the FTE calculation spreadsheet. So that's one way, that one shorthand way that we've come to describe this is what is the universe of the FTEs that you count, and the answer is only those that provide WIOA services in that local area. The last and third concept about the FTE calculation spreadsheet is that the direct linkage technology, when that is used, the staff who are providing the services via direct linkage are still counted towards your FTE count. So, for example, if a customer walks into a one-stop center in Marion and needs a certain program, and those services are provided via technology by a staff member in Chicago, then the FTE in Chicago is still counted towards the FTE calculation in the Marion one-stop. And again, I hope this helps solidify when Mike takes over the webinar and shows you the example in the spreadsheet. And again, I'm just repeating myself, but Appendix Item 4 in the Governor's Guidelines, again, provides more detail about what direct linkage means. So we encourage you to go there. So now I'll turn it over to Mike, and he can share the actual spreadsheet.
Thank you.
For sure.
So what we have here are a couple of examples. Oh, hello. There we go.
Your spreadsheet clicked out for some reason.
Here, I just want to show it.
Okay, that's pulling up now. Sorry about that.
Okay, this is a representation of the FTE calculation page. Let's see if I can get this. No, that's covering it. Can I get this to move out of the way? There we go. There we go. Okay, so this is the FTE table, and you can see the partners down the left side. And in this example, I've already plugged in some arbitrary FTEs for each contributing program. As you can see, if you look down the column, this column here where the numbers are at, the first column of numbers, the total is 32. So the sum of the FTEs across all these programs is 32. Then if a program is contributing services to another program, you would list the contributing partner in the second column and the amount of FTEs they are contributing in the column next to that. If another program is contributing FTEs to the same program, they would be listed separately here and the FTEs here. And as you can see, we have a total for on-site FTEs and then a direct linkage column and then total FTEs that is not shaded that appears in white. So if you look at the bottom row, you'll see 32 is the total for every column that has information. Well, I would like to advance the slide. There we go. Okay. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. So in this slide, we are using cross-trained staff to provide services. So in the column of contributing partner number 1, we've identified that Title 1B is providing a half headcount or half FTE to TAA. And down below that, Veteran Services is providing 0.5 FTEs to Title III Wagner Pizer. And then in the next set of columns, we're showing that UI comp programs are contributing 0.5 FTEs to Wagner Pizer Title III. So as you can see, there we go. So what happens is, to show this correctly, you reduce the FTE of the contributing program and add the FTE to the receiving program. So if you've done it properly, the totals at the bottom of these columns should be 0 because you're creating a wash, essentially. These transfers cancel each other out. Okay? So again, if you look at the very bottom row, our total FTEs is still 32, but we're reflecting that several programs are helping each other out. Okay? Now, in this example, we are adding the element of direct linkage. So in this example, Title 1B is still helping out TAA with 0.5 FTEs. But in this case, instead of having other programs help out with shared cross-trained staff, the Wagner Pizer program is adding an FTE through direct linkage. So that is an additional FTE on top of their on-site staff. So there's none of this backing out and adding in. You simply add in the FTEs that are available through direct linkage. So in this case, we start out with 32 FTEs, but since we're adding the 1 FTE through direct linkage, that increases the total FTEs by 1, and we have a total of 33. So that is how you would work the FTE table. And these slides are available for download if you want to print those out or keep them or save them to have a reference. But if anybody has any questions on how that works, we'd be happy to address them. Okay, to Steve's question, can a contributing partner be cross-trained to provide service for more than one partner? Yes. How do you account for building resources with the non-WIOA staff? To Susan's question, I mean, those are resources that are not relevant to the MOU. So those, as for the purposes of the MOU and the negotiations, do not exist. And then, as you know from using the sheet last year, when you fill out these FTEs, those will flow over into the cost allocation for each center. And that will, if you plug in the amounts that each total cost on the line items is negotiated, like what the total cost is for each item, the spreadsheet will calculate for you what the distribution is for each partner, for both infrastructure costs and other costs. Okay, and there we are.
The next section is about the standard budget spreadsheet, and we'll do the same thing where I'm just going to highlight a couple of concepts and then Mike will take you through the standard budget spreadsheet example. So the first concept for the standard budget spreadsheet is that the sum of all the required partner contributions must equal the total annual budget. So if you remember last year, we all got a little bit of a pass because the federal agencies delayed the effective date for infrastructure funding, and the advice was to, for the one-stop systems to do what you did under WIOA. So in Illinois last year, that meant that the one-stop partners who contributed to shared costs under WIOA did so again last year, but those that did not contribute to shared costs under WIOA did not. And that resulted in the spreadsheet last year sometimes being unbalanced between the total infrastructure cost to operate the one-stop center and the amount that all the partners paid or contributed towards those costs. So this year it's different because an unbalanced spreadsheet is not okay. This year the requirement, the infrastructure funding, will take effect, and the spreadsheet does have to balance so that all the required partners have to contribute towards the shared costs, and the sum of all those contributions have to total up to cover the cost of the operating the one-stop center. So when Mike gets into the spreadsheet, the cell B40 should equal cell W40, and you'll see that when he gets there. Okay. The next item is the concept of that we revisited in December related to the infrastructure costs and the ways that the partners can meet their contributions for the infrastructure costs. First, they can pay cash. Second, non-cash contributions. And third, third-party in-kind contributions. Now this is under the local mechanism where all the partners agree. It's a different story under the state funding mechanism when impasse is reached and there are more restrictions on the infrastructure costs. But for purposes of examples, we just want to highlight the concept when in the local funding mechanism when partners agree, these are the three ways that they can contribute: cash, non-cash, or third-party in-kind. And if you'll note, there are no in-kind staffing allowed for infrastructure costs. So the little table on the right of the screen gives you more of a definition, and they're also in the glossary in the Governor's Guidelines Revision 2. Then there are also some ways that the partners can meet their cost obligations for the shared system costs. And if you remember, the local system costs are the non-personnel costs that are required to deliver services in the local one-stop delivery system. So if you think of the entire system throughout the local area and not just one physical one-stop center, that's what we mean by shared local delivery system costs. And the final rules allow partners to contribute cash, non-cash, in-kind staffing, which is allowed under the shared costs, and third-party in-kind contributions. Okay, so the example on the right side of the screen so let's just give an example that partner A has to contribute $5,000 towards the local system costs. But they don't want to use cash, they want to do a non-cash contribution of, say, joint training and customer satisfaction survey, because those are going to promote service integration. So that's fine as long as three things happen. All the local partners accept the non-cash contribution, so it can't just be one partner saying, I'm going to do this non-cash contribution, so you have to accept it. No, it doesn't work that way. All the partners have to agree to accept that contribution as a non-cash contribution. The second requirement is that the cost of the training and the customer satisfaction survey offset the $5,000 that the partner would have paid in cash otherwise. And the third requirement is that the training and the customer satisfaction survey are fairly valued at $5,000. So they have to be accepted by everyone, they have to offset the cash contribution, and then they have to be fairly valued. So now Mike can pull up the spreadsheet, and he'll show you some examples throughout how to use it and some of the certain sections we want to highlight. Just 1 second, please. We're pulling it up now. It's just the computer is slow, so I apologize. It'll come up in just a second, please.
This is sure. So when we practice this worked much faster. So someone didn't feed the internet squirrels overnight, apparently. But it's coming up. Okay. So here is our blank spreadsheet and our blank shared cost. And as you can see across the bottom, there are several tabs. So if you start on the left, far left, we have some definitions for you of what our facilities cost, technology costs, and some examples of each one. And then system cost definitions. And these changed based on the final rules and are reflected in the new governor's guidelines. And then for each comprehensive center you have in your local area, you'll have an FTE chart and a cost allocation chart. There. Okay. So these are very similar to the forms that we used last year, so this shouldn't be too shocking of a document for you. So the first thing you have to do is figure out what your FTEs are going to look like across all the partners. So to keep this very simple, I'm just going to assume that everybody is going to do on-site. Helps turn the number lock on. Sorry about that. And you just enter one FTE or the appropriate FTE for each partner. You know, in some cases this could go down to 0.25, but that's the minimum that you can express in the spreadsheet. And it could go up to however many staff a particular program wants to provide to services. So in this case, if every partner is, well, let's go ahead and include these other partners as well. And then we have space for two other partners that are not part of the required mixture in case somebody else locally is just a real go-getter and wants to be part of the one-stop. Okay. So we have 18 FTEs spread across all the partners. And for example, if you wanted to play around with sharing cross-trained staff, you would just, if Title 1B wanted to contribute that half FTE to TAA like we talked about in the example before, you would just take off an FTE off of Title 1 and add that back to TAA. 0.5. There we go. So that's why we've done that formula, because you can see it's easy to make a clerical error on data entry, and this helps you catch that. So we'll take that out for now. So if you go to the Cost Allocation Center, you'll see that each partner across the top here in row 12 has been assigned one FTE. And that is pulled over from the prior spreadsheet. So whatever data you enter on that FTE calculation sheet is going to automatically be filtered into this sheet. And if for some reason you're going off the grid and not using an FTE allocation, you would uncheck this box. But we encourage everyone to use FTEs. So what you have to do then is figure out what your total costs are going to be for the infrastructure. So we'll keep things nice and simple, but we'll say $100,000 for the lease cost, and we're just going to use very round numbers here. But you get the idea, okay? And as you can see, in row 14, the spreadsheet will total all of the amounts for that category for you. So you can start out with what the total facilities costs are, and then you can break it down by these individual items. The same for technology, telecom and internet, we'll say, and these are just absolutely made up numbers, we're just keeping it simple here to demonstrate how it works. Signage, we'll give that one $10. I feel like Bob Ross making a painting here. A happy little number. Okay, so you can see all of these amounts are distributed equally across all the partners because each partner is contributing the same number of FTEs to the overall operation of the center. So that's why all these numbers are the same. If you go back and mix it up, and let's just say Title 1B is going to do 5, and Title 3 is going to do 2. Again, these are just made up numbers. You can see that the 5 and 2 carry over, and the numbers go up for those programs and down for everything else because you've changed the way the balance is being distributed. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. If you have any other infrastructure costs, there's 3 lines here where you can enter that, and those will be distributed across the partners as appropriate. Now here's where we get into some numbers where you can plug in. If a program is going to make a cash contribution, you would enter that amount. So this is, let's say TAA is going to make a contribution of $1,000. Okay. Column B will total up any items that you enter for that, and it will give a credit to the program that does that. So again, this calculates everything for you. So if they make a cash contribution, you'd enter it there. If another program is doing a non-cash contribution, you would figure out the fair market value of that contribution and enter it there. And we'll leave the third party in kind alone for now. But as you can see in the balance, these contributions have affected the overall share for each partner. And then the same process works under shared delivery costs. You have your staffing, salary, benefits, and other expenses. This is the total of all partners. And you see how it's distributed out based on the FTEs. Meeting cost, for the full year, that's a little out there. How about let's get a little more realistic. But as you can see, you plug in the total amount, and based on the allocation on the FTE sheet, it distributes the costs across every partner. And you do that all the way down in all of these categories. So this is not too, whoop, didn't mean to do that.
So basically you're entering numbers in every yellow section.
Yes.
The yellow sections are where you enter the data.
Right. And then if somebody was doing, I did something wrong there, I believe. There. Okay. And then again, if you have contributions, cash, non-cash, or in kind, or the third party in kind, they would be added here. The value would be. And then we have a reference arrow, and I believe it's just because there's a number added somewhere. We'll have to figure that out. Then on the shared cost summary, you'll get a total of the infrastructure costs of the main center, and then if there are shared costs at other centers, those will be totaled in, and all of these other different center tabs will total up and carry over into this front sheet. And then at the bottom, it's totaling up the cash contributions for each partner and calculating out what the distribution would be. And I'm not sure why we're getting a ref error message. I tried every permutation last night and didn't get anything, so I'm wondering. Oh, and it's locked, so I can't see what's behind there. So I'll double check that, and we'll figure that out for you and get that straightened out. But the idea is that it pulls the data in from each of the sheets and totals it up and does the calculations for you. So that's basically how you go around the data entry. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to help.
Okay, we'll start look into some questions, and whatever we don't get to, we'll try to respond to them after in writing so that everyone's questions can be addressed as much as possible. I'm looking through the questions now. If an agency is a staff person that is providing career services in an affiliate or an office outside of the comprehensive one-stop, should the person be counted as an FTE?
That's part of the new situation that we have to look at.
Yeah, so for now, the answer is the infrastructure costs are just for the comprehensive one-stop center, and the shared costs are for the whole center, or for the whole system.
Right.
Well, we're couching that because we're going to talk about the federal guidance in the next slide. And the federal guidance affects how you treat affiliate centers.
So I think we should have an offline discussion on that one. I think we need to understand a little more about how that works before we could give you a definitive answer. So if you could send us your contact info, we'd be happy to talk with you about that.
And Michelle's question relates to, are FTEs determined based on system costs, infrastructure costs, or both? It's actually, if you think about it, it's any FTE that is committed to provide services in your local area. So for the FTE calculation spreadsheet, you're not worried about infrastructure costs versus shared costs. You're just thinking how many FTEs, am I as a required partner committing to provide services in this local area? Any other questions before we move on to the federal guidance and how they fit into this big picture? Okay. The federal guidance, there's a little bit of deja vu all over again, because if you remember last year, we issued the governor's guidelines in December, and then in January, the feds came out with a guidance that delayed infrastructure funding and said just do what you did under WIOA. So the timing of the guidance this year is very similar. We issued governor's guidelines for Vision 2 in December, on December 8th, and then a month later, the feds issued new federal guidance on January 18th that really includes some significant implications for the way that infrastructure costs are funded, the way that affiliate centers are accounted for, and the way that career services are budgeted. So the first item that we just wanted to mention is here on the slide are the links to the 3 training and employment and guidance letters, or TEGLs, that affect the competitive selection of one-stop operators, the one-stop operations, and the infrastructure funding. So you can read for yourself what those say, and what we want to highlight today is what the WIOA Interagency Work Group is doing since this guidance came out. They are seeking clarification from the U.S. Department of Labor's Region 5, basically around 3 primary concerns: infrastructure cost funding requirements, the approach to affiliate and specialized centers, and how career services are reflected in annual budgets. So we are in the process of seeking that guidance and also considering how that might affect the Governor's Guidelines Revision 2. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes, and there's some clarification being sought from the federal agencies. Until then, the direction is to operate under the current Governor's Guidelines Revision 2 until further notice. So that's why we didn't go into all the TEGL implications today, because those are being discussed, considered, sought clarifications, and still being determined how the revision, how Governor's Guidelines Revision 2 would be changed, if at all. So that's why when we go through the MOU template and the spreadsheets today, it's the same that we introduced to you in December that aligns with Governor's Guidelines Revision 2. So keep using those until you hear otherwise. That's unfortunately where we are with this ill-timed federal guidance for how after that we already issued the Governor's Guidelines Revision 2 to reflect the final rules. So the last item that we wanted to touch base on is just the timeline for the activities that's going to go on, especially leading up to April 15th. So given that the Governor's Guidelines Revision 2 spells out a timeline for everything to become effective July 1st, 2017, including infrastructure costs, these are the dates that you have to keep in mind as benchmarks leading all the way up to July 1st. And these also on the dates on the screen are generally the same dates that the STAT teams, or the state technical assistant teams, are following to check on the progress in each local area and region. So by mid-January, hopefully by now, the local board chair has designated an individual to lead the MOU negotiations and an individual to lead the budget negotiations. And also hopefully by now, the first meeting has been, of required partners has been convened to discuss annual shared costs based on the demand for services. So by mid-February, hopefully you're around this time that the local budget could be distributed to the local partners as a draft to review before you meet for a second time to talk about the draft. And by the end of February, in an ideal world, you would have your meeting 2 to talk about the draft budget. And then that would allow you by mid-March to submit your final budget for all the required partners to review to get their buy-in and make sure everything's good before you meet for a third time. And that third meeting in an ideal world would happen by the end of March so that you could all approve the final budget before the final outcome of the negotiations is reported on April 15th. And after April 15th, that's when the remediation period starts if there's a need. If the local partners can't agree and there's some things that the state partners can do to help out and make sure you don't reach impasse, that's what that remediation period is for. And then ultimately, if you're still at impasse, that's when the state infrastructure funding mechanism kicks in and the governor has to set the local budget for infrastructure costs and other implications. But right now the focus should be on trying to get that draft budget out for review and everyone convened around the table and the draft budget worked on so that you can hopefully have an agreed upon budget by April 15th.
And just to highlight also, Bethany has mentioned the STAT teams as a resource a couple of times. I just want to emphasize the STAT teams are not monitors. They are not folks that are trying to engage in gotchas. They are there for a resource for you, and if they are calling asking, hey, have you taken care of this, taken care of that yet, they're doing it because they want to make sure that everybody stays on pace, and if anybody is running into troubles, that it's identified earlier rather than later. Earlier,
so that if the STAT identifies that something is behind schedule, maybe there's a reason for that the state partners could help expedite. So they're really just there, again, as a liaison to the interagency work group and to hopefully expedite any issues that require state-level attention. So hopefully they're more of a resource for you than a nag. But we also gave them a checklist to follow just so they can help us understand where the local areas are in the negotiation processes and if there are any problem areas that need to be addressed sooner rather than later, so that we don't find out at the end when it's too close to the timeline that the budget is supposed to be implemented that there was a problem. We're trying to find it out a lot earlier in the process so that we can help do something about it if possible. So those are the highlights, and we understand that there are some questions about the Tegels, but we are working on it and we'll get that guidance out as soon as possible. Until then, just continue to use the Governor's Guidelines Revision 2. Are there any questions about anything we presented today, or particularly about the federal guidance that we just talked about? Okay, that will conclude the webinar, and we do encourage you to go to the WIOA implementation portal at this link on the screen, especially under the Documents and Updates page, because this is where you'll find the active version of the MOU template, the spreadsheets, the Governor's Guidelines, and many other resources. So you know you can go to this link to always get the most recent version. If we were to issue a revision to any of the documents, we would post it on the portal immediately so that only the most recent version is available, and we'll communicate that widely if any revisions are issued to the Governor's Guidelines or the documents we went over today. So please feel free to use this. You don't need a password to access the Documents and Updates page where these documents are. So you can click on that link at any time and check out all the resources and download the fillable versions of each of the documents that we went over today. And actually, I encourage you to always go there to get the most recent version rather than relying on your email. Any last questions before we close? Okay, well, we thank you for your patience. We do apologize for those technology glitches and the delays. We did get through everything, and we truly appreciate your attention to all these important issues as the timelines for negotiations, the clock is ticking. So thank you very much, and we will be in touch as soon as possible regarding any revisions if necessary.
Thanks, everyone.